Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. This is the second episode of the objection that has been raised against Ustaz Ghamidi regarding the issue of hijab or parda. In our previous episode, we had seen some of the concepts which our prevailing scholars relate to the issue of hijab and parda. And we had also seen that according to Ustaz Javed Ahmad Ghamidi, the basic place or the basic issue where this whole content has been discussed is in Surah Nur. And he's also said that the word hijab is basically a misplaced name. It is not an appropriate name because it is not used in the Quran anywhere to connote the way or the meaning that we derive from it. And he has said that a more appropriate meaning for this is norms of gender interaction. So he says that as far as these norms are concerned, they are discussed in Surah Nur, and these are the general communal conduct norms that have to be understood. Now, there are certain specifics in this regard which have been discussed in Surah Ahzab, and by not understanding those specifics, Surah Ahzab is also considered to be a surah, or the verses which are appropriate and relevant in it, they are also thought to refer to this subject. In general circumstances, of course, it is Surah Nur, which we have just studied, but in the age of the Prophet in Medina, when some miscreants started teasing and besmearing the characters of Muslim women, the Almighty in Surah Ahzab bade the wives of the Prophet, his daughters, and other Muslim women to draw over them any of the shawls they have when they go out to places which were insecure. Such dressing up would distinguish them from women of lewd character, and they would not be teased on the pretext of being outwardly similar to such women. It is reported in various hadith narratives that when Muslim women in the dark of night or in the dim light of dawn would go out to relieve themselves, these miscreants would get after them, and then when they would be called to account, they would say that they actually wanted to talk to such and such a woman, thinking that she was a slave woman. So the Quran states, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْذُونَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بِغَيْرِ مَا اكْتَسَبُوا فَقَدِ احْتَمَلُوا بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا يَا أَيُّهَا النَّبِيُّ قُل لِأَزْوَاجِكَ وَبَنَاتِكَ وَنِسَاءِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبِهِنَّ ذَلِكَ أَدْنَىٰ أَنْ يُعْرَفْنَ فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا لئن لم ينته المنافقون والذين في قلوبهم مرض والمرجفون في المدينة لنغرينك بهم ثم لا يجاورونك فيها إلا قليلا ملعونين أينما ثقفوا أخذوا وقتلوا تقتيلا. And those who harass believing men and believing women for what they never did should know that they shall bear the guilt of slander and a grievous sin. O Prophet, in this situation, enjoin your wives, your daughters, and the wives of true believers to draw over them a shawl when they go out. It will become possible from this that they be distinguished from other women and not be harassed. God is ever forgiving and merciful. If after these measures also these hypocrites and those who have the ailment of jealousy in their hearts and the scandal mongers of Medina do not desist, we will rouse you against them, and their days in that city will be numbered. Cursed be they wherever found. They would be seized and put to exemplary death. So it is evident from the words أَن يُعْرَفْنَ فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ and their context that they do not contain any directive related to hijab. It was a temporary measure adopted to distinguish the identity of Muslim women in order to protect them from the evil of lecherous people and those who were indulging in unfounded slander. Now, owing to similar reasons, the Prophet has also forbade Muslim women from traveling alone on long journeys and from walking on pathways within the crowd of men. So, consequently, if today Muslim women are faced with similar circumstances, they should adopt a similar measure to make themselves distinct from other women to protect themselves. The surah also mentions certain directives that are specific to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in his capacity as a messenger of God. They too bear no relation to other people, but since scholars have extended their sphere of application to all Muslims, their explanation has been proffered by Ustaz Ghamidi. So he says that a deliberation on the contents of Surah Ahzab reveals the fact that when the hypocrites and miscreants mentioned in this surah embarked upon a campaign to scandalize the private lives of the Prophet Muhammad, to make the common man averse to them, and to damage the moral repute of both Islam and the Muslims, the Almighty took certain measures to curb this evil. Now, first, He gave the noble wives the choice to leave the Prophet and live the life of common Muslim women, enjoying its luxuries and comforts, or to once again decide with full awareness to live forever as the wives of the Prophet in order to obtain the comforts and luxuries of the hereafter. They were informed that if they decided to stay with the Prophet, then they must realize that their status as his wives entailed great responsibility. They are not like common Muslim women. They are like the mothers of the believers. So, if they remain faithful to God and His Prophet and do righteous deeds with full sincerity, they will earn a twofold reward. Likewise, they will be worthy of a twofold punishment in relation to other women if they commit a sin. Their inner purification is beyond doubt, but the Almighty also wants to morally cleanse them in the eyes of people so that no one is given a chance to even cast slight aspersions on their characters. Now, this was a requisite of their status that they must adopt certain things in their daily lives to achieve this purity. And what were those things? They are, firstly, if they are fearful of the Almighty, they should not be kind and affectionate in speech to every person who enters their house. Though in normal circumstances, one must be gentle and kind when he speaks to others, but in the circumstances they are facing, the wives of the Prophet are facing, such an attitude would only embolden the miscreants and the hypocrites around them to take undue advantage of them. Such an attitude of kindness would create in them the expectation of success in their mission, the mission of whispering evil in people's hearts. And thus the Quran says, يا نساء النبي لستن كأحد من النساء إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض وقلن قولا معروفا. Wives of the Prophet, you are not like other women. So, if you fear God, do not be too complacent in your speech, lest the lecherous-hearted should lust after you. Talk with such people in plain and simple words. Now, the second thing which is mentioned here is that they should remain in their homes in order to protect their rank and status. All their attitudes and mannerisms should be in accordance with the status that the Almighty has conferred upon them. So if they have to go out to meet some compelling need, they must go out in a way that they are not displaying their ornaments and finery, something which was the way of the women of the age of Jahiliyyah. Both their status and responsibility entail that they remain in their houses, diligently pray and pay zakah as much as they can, and with full sincerity spend their time in obedience to the Almighty and His Prophet. And if due to some unavoidable reason they must leave their place, then they should do so in the most befitting of manners, exemplifying the culture and tradition of the Muslims, and not let any hypocrite raise any objection against them.
وقرن في بيوتكن ولا تبرجن تبرج الجاهلية الأولى وأقمنا الصلاة وآتينا الزكاة وأطعنا الله ورسوله إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. And abide still in your homes, and do not display your finery as women used to do in the days of Jahiliyyah. Attend to your prayers, pay zakah, and obey God and His Messenger. Women of this house, the Almighty wants to cleanse you from the filth these hypocrites want to besmear you with, and to fully purify you.
Thirdly, they should try to communicate the verses of the Quran as well as the beliefs and moral teachings of Islam to people who come and visit them, and refrain from their general gossip. So it was for this very objective that the Almighty has chosen them. Their purpose of life now is the dissemination of the message of God and not indulgence in the luxuries of life. So the Quran has said,
واذكرن ما يتلى في بيوتكن من آيات الله والحكمة إن الله كان لطيفا خبيرا.
And communicate to your visitors what is taught to you of the verses of God and the wisdom revealed by Him. The Almighty is very discerning and all-knowing. So every believer should honor and respect them the way he honors and respects his mother. The Prophet is greatly distressed by the wrong attitudes of these miscreants. They must now be aware that bothering the Prophet is not something trivial. A person may fashion out an excuse for his misdemeanor in this world, but he would not be successful in justifying it before the Lord of the worlds, who is aware of what is in the hearts.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تدخلوا بيوت النبي إلا أن يؤذن لكم إلى طعام غير ناظرين إناه ولكن إذا دعيتم فادخلوا فإذا طعمتم فانتشروا ولا مستأنسين لحديث إن ذلكم كان يؤذي النبي فيستحيي منكم والله لا يستحيي من الحق وإذا سألتموهن متاعا فاسألوهن من وراء حجاب ذلكم أطهر لقلوبكم وقلوبهن وما كان لكم أن تؤذوا رسول الله ولا أن تنكحوا أزواجه من بعده أبدا إن ذلكم كان عند الله عظيما إن تبدوا شيئا أو تخفوه فإن الله كان بكل شيء عليما لا جناح عليهن في آبائهن ولا أبنائهن ولا إخوانهن ولا أبناء إخوانهن ولا أبناء أخواتهن ولا نسائهن ولا ما ملكت أيمانهن واتقين الله إن الله كان على كل شيء شهيدا. Believers, do not enter the houses of the Prophet except if you are permitted sometime to enter for a meal. In this case also, do not sit waiting for the food to be cooked. But if you are invited, enter, and when you have eaten, disperse. Do not engage in familiar talk, for this would distress the Prophet, and he would feel shy to bid you go. But of the truth, God does not feel shy. And if you ask his wives for anything, speak to them from behind a curtain. This is more pure for your hearts and their hearts. And you must not harass God's messenger, nor shall you ever wed his wives after him. This would be a grave offense in the sight of God. Whether you reveal or conceal them, God has knowledge of all things. It shall be no offense for these women's, Prophet's wives, to come before their fathers, their sons, their brothers' sons, their sisters' sons, their women of acquaintance, or their slaves. O women of the household of the Prophet, have fear of God. Surely God observes all things.
So viewers, this is the view of Ustaz Javed Ahmad Ghamidi regarding the norms of gender interaction. He has said that the word hijab is a misnomer. It does not belong here. The right term to describe the directives of the Quran is norms of gender interaction. And now, in the light of this description and this discussion, if we go back to the statutes or the 5 points which our scholars generally believe to be the ones that portray their concept of hijab, we can comment on them one by one. First, women must cover their faces and wear large cloaks or jilbabs when they go out of their houses. If we look at this point, we will see that it has arisen by not understanding Surah Ahzab verses which we have just discussed. Those verses specifically relate to a particular situation in which women are told that in order to distinguish themselves from lecherous women, so it does not relate in any way to the issue of hijab, because as we've just explained that this is an issue or this is an area of Surah Ahzab, this is an instance of Surah Ahzab which relates to the situation which the Munafiqun had created. The second point that was raised was women must not speak in a polite tone with strangers. Again, this is a wrong and erroneous interpretation. It has once again resulted by not understanding the specific verses of Surah Ahzab. That was exactly what has been prescribed in the case when women were facing these hypocrites who were trying to scandalize their lives. They would barge into the houses and they would then try to speak to them in a way that would scandalize their lives, and then they would come out and report that they had spoken to them in such and such a way. The third point that was discussed was, or raised by our common scholars, women should primarily be confined to their homes, which should be their center of activities. This has been established once again that Surah Ahzab is the place where the Prophet's wives were told to stick to their homes because these hypocrites would like to besmear their character. They want to bring disrepute to them. And instead of tightening the hypocrites, the Almighty actually gave some strict directives to the wives of the Prophet so that if there is any chance for the hypocrites to mend their ways, they are afforded with that chance. And it was specifically to curb that situation that wives of the Prophet were told that they should stick to their homes, and thus this particular directive can in no way be extended to all Muslim women, that they must be confined to their homes. This has a very particular and a very specific scope of application. 4. It is mandatory for women to cover their heads at all times. This also is not true. If we look at how we have discussed the relevant verses of Surah Nur, which says, La yubdina zinatahunna illa ma zahara minha, it means that they should not display their finery. But if they have not made up their hair, it is not essential to cover them, although it would be recommended they do so, but the mandatory part would then disappear. 5. Women should be kept secluded except from their immediate relatives. Now, this also is a misinterpretation from the verses of Surah Ahzab, in which, of course, the wives of the Prophet were given this directive, given the situation that the hypocrites had created. So this brings us to an end to this second episode. In the next episode, we shall discuss some more questions that have arisen on Ustaz Ghamidi's view.